Everyone wants money. It's a hot topic of interest amongst young adults. Thousands of videos are posted about money every day, and millions of people watch videos about that same topic every day. There is a massive industry based on money, and billions of dollars go into enabling financial tools. But today, we're going to be covering everything there is to know about the basics of money. I'm Alex, and a cash man, it's our goal to educate and teach about money. So who am I? I'm a high school student, and I've had an entrepreneurial spirit for as long as I remember. Starting lemonade stands, selling things on Facebook Marketplace, you name it, I've tried it. And a lot of the businesses, I've seen quite a bit of success. But I want to settle down and focus on delivering content to people who need it. In this guide, like I've said, we're going to be covering everything there is about the basics. This includes how the economic machine operates, credit score, budgeting, investing, and a lot more. This guide will be divided into parts and several videos, so be sure to consume at your own pace. That being said, let's get started. Many of us take for granted the way the world operates. Money has become an essential tool and a guarantee of life. Everywhere you go, there's money. Whether it's in American dollars, Japanese yen, euros, or some other form of currency, everyone has a global system of money. But it wasn't always like that. Money used to not exist. In fact, we had something called the bartering system. Bartering system worked on an economy where no one had any money. So instead of exchanging goods and services for cash, people would trade goods and services for, well, goods and services. A farmer would go to the farmer's market, where he would trade and exchange his apples and his produce for other services, like maybe some new tools or maybe some new clothes. Because money didn't exist back then, people had to rely on what other people had to make exchanges. However, in the modern day, we have money that's controlled by the government, and this allows us something called liquidity. Liquidity basically means the ability to move value. Money is by far the best example of this. Money lets you buy anything you could possibly want so long as someone can sell it. Nowadays, our modern economy runs on several factors. The first is productivity. This is workers working and producing goods. This is also businesses producing goods. Then there's spending. So people buy these goods. People buy these with their hard-earned money that they get from their jobs or from their professions. And then there is income. So people will get paid from their jobs or they will get paid from other sources. This is the basic economic machine, because whenever someone spends, someone else earns. And so this produces a loop of people who spend money, other people's earn money, and so on and so forth. People spend, people earn, people produce value, and then people spend on that value. An example of this back to the farm. The farmer goes and produces fruit. The farmer then goes to the market and sells that fruit for money. He then takes the money that he just made and uses that money to employ his employees to make more fruit. That is the basic, easy economic principle. But in our complicated world, it's never that easy. There's a fourth factor called lending. Basically what lending is when you go to a bank and you ask them for money that you do not have. You ask them to borrow some money so that you can spend it now and increase your income so that you can then pay it back later. This is a driving factor behind the modern economy, because when people take on debt like this, the bank is rewarded with something called credit. It's basically an IOU of however much the person has taken plus interest. And because of this, banks are capable of collecting massive amounts of money from people who just want to spend. When you give a bank credit, or when you receive debt, is good when it enables you to buy something that will help you increase your income. The same kind of debt or the credit that you give the banks is not good when you are spending on something that will not benefit you in the future. In our modern economy, money is controlled by the government. Something called the Federal Reserve prints and creates money. This is also known as central banking. So what central banking does, it allows a certain amount of money within the economy. For example, the United States of America has the Federal Reserve, where they have $3 trillion in cash in circulation. The government makes sure that there isn't too much money so that there's inflation, and makes sure that there isn't too little money for the amount of people in case there's deflation. We'll get into these terms later. The next most important thing to know is about economic cycles. Like I've said before, there's a cycle to money. People produce work, people get paid, people take loans to increase the amount they earn, and people spend money. These four steps all make a circle that feeds into the next circle. So if I buy one thing, another person is profiting the exact amount that I've just spent. Positive growth in the economy occurs when everyone's working, everyone's taking loans, and people are producing enough money so that they can pay back their loans in time. This often happens for about 6 years. But eventually, people will start taking out loans that they cannot pay back. And because greed is part of human nature, oftentimes people will end up defaulting on these loans. And that causes a recession. A recession happens when people start defaulting on their loans, can't pay them back, banks start shutting down, the government starts increasing interest rates, and the whole economy freezes. However, recessions are not permanent. The government will always decrease their interest rates and increase the amount of spending that the people do. These economic cycles determine the prices, the amount of activity, and everything there is to about the economy. When we're in a recession, stocks crash. When we're in an inflationary cycle, stocks rise. Similarly, prices rise when we are in an inflationary cycle, and prices fall when we aren't. That being said, this is only one part of the economy. This was just so that you know how the basic of the economy works. Let's talk income. To live, everyone needs an income, whether it be from a job, from a business, from a side hustle. Everyone needs money to survive. This is because the more value that you provide to a society, essentially the value of your job, the more money you are paid. This is because the impact that a McDonald's employee has on the society is not nearly as great as a doctor. And so in our capitalist system, people who provide more value to this earth gain more money. That is the golden rule to understand business, understand expenses, and understand finance. So what are the primary ways of earning an income? Obviously, as your parents have told you, there are jobs and careers. Jobs and careers pay you by either two things, salary or wage. Salary is a set amount of money that you're paid for the hours you work all over the year. An example, a teacher is paid $60,000 in salary over the year. This means no matter how much the teacher shows up to work, so long as the job is done, they earn $60,000. Obviously, they don't get the big lump sum at the end of the year. Rather, they are rewarded about $1,000 every week. On the other hand, there is something called wage workers. Now, a wage worker will go into a job and clock in their hours. And at the end of the week, for how many hours they've worked, they earn that times the wage. So the wage can be represented by something like $15 an hour. $15 in an hour means if I've worked 40 hours this week, that means 5 days of 8 hours, and I'm earning $15 an hour, then you multiply the two, the 15 times the 40, to get $600. Now, we all want a high income, but it isn't as simply as going to apply to the job. There are many factors that you want to take into account. Having a university degree, having experience, and many more factors all determine who is the best candidate for the job. Example, a hospital would never hire a doctor if they didn't have a certificate. So when it comes to jobs, salaries, and careers, higher education is the #1 method of getting a high-paying job. But jobs and careers aren't the only way that you can earn money. There are many people who own businesses, and these businesses often become very, very successful. However, understand, not everyone in this world can own a business. There has to be workers. Otherwise, no businesses would even exist. Amazon employs over 10,000 people. If each person owned their own business, there'd simply be so much competition that no one would be able to make a dime. But even if business and entrepreneurship does seem tempting, it's not for everyone. Personally, I've found that business and entrepreneurship is my passion, and I want to go into it. I understand that some people are more content working a salary job. Just think, in a salary job, it's a lot safer, it's less risky, and at the end of the week, you're guaranteed to get your pay. Unlike a salaried worker, a businessman can earn some weeks where they earn $5,000 and other weeks where they earn -$5,000. Business is very volatile, and entrepreneurship is even more so. Understand the danger difference between working a job and being a businessman. If neither of these options seem ideal, you can do something called freelancing. It's essentially a business, but you still work kind of like a job. You work for other companies doing something you love, but you are not employed by these companies by contract. Instead, these companies have jobs that they need done ASAP, and you fulfill that role and get paid by job. Example, there's a website called Fiverr where you can hire anyone to do anything. They're graphic designers that will make logos for you, and your only relationship with that person is merely for the job. Once the job is over, they get paid, you get your logo, and that's that. This is a pretty nice balance for a lot of people. Understand that this is slightly less risky, nonetheless still risky, and can earn you a lot more money than a salary, but less than a business. For many people, this is the perfect middle ground, but I recommend that you stick to one of the two main ones. Let's talk budgeting. Budgeting is a crucial part to managing your finances. Let's say you take all of your salary pay, all of your wage pay, and you just dunk it into whatever you want. You will not have enough money for what you need. Having a budget basically allocates what money you need to spend, what money you want to spend, and what money you put in savings. These are three big categories that almost all budgets have. Some budgets are more complex than others, some with 4, 5, 6, even 7 categories. Budgets are tools that help you manage your finances. One of the biggest budgets out there and most commonly followed is called the 50-30-20 rule. It's called this because 50% of your money goes to your needs, 30% goes to your wants, and 20% goes to saving and or investing. In general, this is a pretty good rule to follow because all of the taxes, bills, and things that you need to pay usually take up somewhere around 50% of your pay. The things that you want like hobbies, passions, and interests, usually took up somewhere around 30, give or take 10%. And investing is always very, very important. More on this later. As a teenager or an adult, it's crucial that you understand the importance of budgeting. Without a budget, many people will end up spending way more on what they want than what they need, and often they'll have nothing left to save. This is how people get stuck in something called the wealth trap. Many poor people don't know much about money. Effectively, they're poor because they don't know about money. And because they don't know about money, they don't know how to stop being poor. Effectively, they earn their paycheck, they spend their paycheck, they get poorer, so they work more and effectively spend their paycheck in the exact same way. It sounds harsh when I say it, but unfortunately, many poor people are going to be forever poor because this is how they live their life. Now, obviously, the 50-30-20 rule does not apply to everyone. There will be cases where you're going to need to tweak it. Maybe you're going to do a 60-30-10 rule. Maybe you're going to do a 40-40-20 rule. Whatever it is, so long as you fit your needs, fit your wants, and fit your savings, you should be able to live a sustainable, healthy life. In my experience, it's always best to never exceed 35% on your wants. Try to stay somewhere around 50% on your needs, but if you have to go over, you have to go over. It is what it is. And always try to at least save 10%. If you can, it's always important to save as much as possible and invest that. More on that later. To make this easier for you to visualize, you're going to set up something called a savings account. Effectively, a savings account works just like a checking account, just like a normal bank account, but it's just somewhere that you put all your savings. I have a savings account where I put 20% of all my income in. I just squirrel it away and I don't touch it. Personally, I invest that income, but I normally just do not touch it. I may have a mutual funds manager manage that for me. I may put it in a GIC. I may use some alternative savings method to save my money and make it grow over time. Overall, it's very handy to have a savings account because the savings account lets you visualize what you have in savings and lets you visualize the other 80% that you have. Let's talk credit score. Do you remember how I said banks will lend out money? Well, they won't just lend out money to anyone. They need someone with a very good credit score. This basically means that the bank views this person as someone who's very likely to pay their loan back. If they borrow $2,000, they're going to pay $2,000 back or more. Now, many people view loans as exclusively loans from a bank. But there are also forms of loans like a credit card. Credit card is basically spending money you don't have, like a debit card, but eventually you pay it back at the end of the month. If you can't pay it all back, then you pay part of it back, and then the next month that debt is piled on with a little bit more interest. It's very important to clear your name of this debt as quickly as possible, because if you have too much debt on your name, it will end up worsening your credit score. Like I've said, the bank needs to see you as trustworthy to have a high credit score. And there are a few things that you can do to increase your credit score. The first thing you need to do is have an account with this credit card company. And once you get your credit card, spend a small amount. Never spend 0% because that will nullify your credit score. Spend a small amount every month and always pay it back at the end of the month in full. It's also crucial to absolutely never miss a credit card payment. If you miss a credit card payment, that will significantly hurt your credit score and will go on your file for several years to come. I think that being able to responsibly use a credit card and having a high credit score is incredibly important for you teenagers and young adults. Because eventually, the time will come where you're going to have to make a big purchase, and you're going to have to borrow quite a bit of money. Maybe it's a car, maybe it's a mortgage on a house, you don't know. So having the high credit score will always enable you to move to the next step in life. An example is, if you actually think that you can buy an entire house in just cash, it's going to take you more than a decade to actually buy that. Say you want a house that costs $250,000, but you're only working $25,000 a year. If you have a credit card, that will let you buy the house after only 2 years, because you can give the bank your $50,000 and they'll give you back $250,000, letting you buy the house now rather than later. Now, many people make the argument, isn't that just robbing your future self? And to a certain extent it is, but it makes debt more manageable. Just think of it this way, you can either work 10 years for that house and buy it and have no debt, or you can work 2 years for the house, buy it, and then work another 8 years while still having the house. In essence, a good credit score is vital to maintain the ability to make loans. It's also vital to increase your credit limit. This means on a credit card, it increases the amount that you can spend before the credit card cuts you off and asks you to pay back your loans first. Effectively, you always want to maintain a high credit score. You can observe your credit score by either going to the bank and asking them for it, or downloading whatever app they use. Let's talk investing. Investing is an all-encompassing term that basically means spending now so that your future is better. Many of your traditional investments, including financial assets, are things like bonds, stocks, mutual funds, etc. But not all investments are strictly financial assets. There are different kinds of assets, like ones that will benefit you in the future by giving you the capability to make more money. The best example of this that I can give is probably education. Education is downright a fantastic method of making you more money, because the more educated you are, statistics show that the more money you will earn. But all of that is fairly wishy-washy, so I'm going to tell you the best investments that you can make in your 20s. Obviously, going to school is the best one, but following suit would probably be ETFs. Following that budgeting rule that I outlined for you, the 50-30-20, you take that 20% and you put it in an ETF that yields you 10% every year. Soon enough, the $1,000 that you put in the first month will start growing and growing. And before you know it, by the time you're 30, you're going to be sitting on $1 million. You didn't even have to make a business. You didn't have to do anything that's out of the ordinary. You just put aside money that you weren't going to spend anyway, and you put it in an ETF. So what exactly are ETFs? ETFs are best thought of baskets of stock. You take a stock, which is a share of a company, think of it as a small slice of pie from a larger piece of pie that you would call the company. So an ETF is like a basket of these stocks. You may have a little Apple, you may have some Amazon, you may have some Facebook. ETFs usually have a massive amount of stock that generally go up over the course of several years. ETFs are great because they're very stable and they diversify your portfolio by nature. If you have a portfolio that's very diversified, as in you have several ETFs, you will get a great analysis of what the market is feeling. Effectively, if everyone's going down, your portfolio will show that, rather than having individual stocks, where they can go up one day, go down one day. Following ETFs pretty close behind are bonds. Now, many people invest in US Treasury bonds because they don't have full trust in stocks. Even if it does yield you more than a bond, people don't trust it because you can't feel, smell, touch, or even look at a stock. It's pretty much a fictionary contract that a company has with you. And so people will invest in US Treasury bonds because they can hold a piece of paper and they know that every year that they lend the government money, they get more money back, even if it's only like 3%. Bonds are a very safe option and one of the safest investments you can make. But I personally would not recommend them because even if you do put 20% of your income aside every year, 3% a year just really doesn't cut it. Now, to cover some traditional assets, like I've mentioned, you have ETFs, mutual funds, which are basically when a person, so a manager, will take your money and will invest it into things for you. He will generally give you a basket of maybe some ETFs, maybe some stocks, maybe some individual bonds, and a bunch of other stuff that will yield you an average return slightly lower than ETFs, slightly higher than bonds. And there's also real estate, which we haven't mentioned. However, for your age bracket from 18 to 25 or teenager and younger, real estate is not very realistic. There are ways to get into real estate, but I'll be covering that in another video. Those are the big traditional assets. However, in the digital age, more and more unorthodox assets have been popping up. When you were young, maybe you remember playing Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, card games, right? As it turns out, many of these card games are still very popular to this day. And many of these cards that you may still have somewhere dug up in your attic are actually worth quite a bit of money. There are many collector items like card games or even Lego sets that accumulate a lot of value on the open market over several years. The longer that they sit in your attic, the more value that they're worth. In fact, there's some Lego sets that go up almost 25% every year. Now, I understand if you don't want to put 20% of your money into Lego. I mean, it's a child's toy. How much can it be worth, right? But there are other alternatives that are slightly safer but still risky. Example, cryptocurrencies and NFTs. NFTs I personally stay away from. Cryptocurrencies I've dabbled in. I think that NFTs are often just fictional. They're all completely hype-based. The only reason an NFT has any actual value is because people think it does. To quickly go over what an NFT is, it's basically an image on the internet with a 40-character key that makes it one of a kind. This 40-character key and the image that it corresponds to have a certain unique value that is usually denoted in either American dollars or cryptocurrency. But like I've said, these are very untrustworthy investments as they are often pump and dump schemes and ploys by higher people to get your money from you. Cryptocurrencies are similar to NFTs, but they're slightly more reliable as the hype for them is consistently year-round. Back in 2019 and 2020, there was a massive peak in interest for cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin shot all the way up to $50,000 US, and Ethereum shot all the way up to $7,000. In 2021 and 2022, they fell more than 50% of that top value. and now they sit somewhere around 20,000 for Bitcoin and about 1,800 for Ethereum. Those are the two big players in the cryptocurrency game. Personally, if you're a risk-averse person that does not want to put too much risk, I would recommend staying away from cryptocurrency. But if you throw caution to the wind and want to experiment with something new, I would recommend maybe even just trying. Just try with a small amount, but also never expect to make your money back. Throwing your money into cryptocurrencies is like gambling at a casino. You can win big, but if you lose all of your money, whose fault is it? Now, remember, the number one thing about assets is they will not make you rich overnight. It's a misconception that many gurus online spread that if you just invest into their stock trading group or their cryptocurrency trading group, they'll make you a millionaire overnight. But be realistic. If there really was a way to make you a millionaire overnight, don't you think all of the big companies would already have figured it out? Or better yet, why aren't there millionaires everywhere you go? Investments are a way of putting your money away so that they beat out inflation. And overall, many investments are fairly safe. But it's important to understand that they will not make you a millionaire overnight. They're a great bonus though, because if you just forget about it for 10 years and have investments automated, eventually you'll look back on that account and realize that like, hey, wow, I have a lot of extra money that I haven't even tapped into. And if it comes to a dire situation, that extra interest that you're earning on stocks, bonds, ETFs, whatever, that may save you in a really dire situation where you need the money. Just think of it this way. You can either stick it into more lavish expenses that you really just don't need, or you can stick your money into expenses that will make you more wealthy in the future. You now understand how the economic machine works. I'll link a video to that explaining it in a lot more detail. You understand that we used to barter for goods, but now because of money and being able to borrow from banks, we can spend more than we have. This allows us way more flexibility in the economic machine than we used to have. You also know how to use a credit card and how to manage your credit score, and even budget so that you never run out of money. You also know how to invest, so that if the worst comes, you'll have that extra money that you need. And in general, you now have a better understanding of what it means to be financially free and financially stable. You also understand how to get a job, what's important to having a job, and what's crucial so that you never lose your job. Even more, you know the primary ways of making money, that being having a job, being a businessman, or being a freelancer. So, what are some last-minute closing tips that I can give you? I recommend religiously saving and investing. Like I just said in the last unit, you should always invest, but I'll never mention the importance of always investing consistently. Like I said, if you invest for 10 years, eventually you'll just be sitting on $1 million. But if you only invest when you feel like it, it's not actually going to turn into $1 million. You have to invest and save religiously. Always squirrel that 20% away. Always put it in these same ETFs. Always diversify your profile. And eventually, if you don't touch it and you keep on investing, you will become a millionaire. The next tip I can do is to do your own research. My channel is not the only one that can give you information about money. In fact, I think there's more qualified and more experienced people in the matter. Some people I can recommend: Mark Tilbury, Ray Dalio, Stephen Graham, and other online personalities can really teach you quite a bit about money and side hustles. Remember to always educate yourself about what's important to your field, and never give up on your budget, even if it needs some reworking. If none of this has really become appealing to you and you want to do your own research, I would recommend searching up entrepreneurship. It's a rough, risky, and tough and tumble land. If done correctly, if stuck to a discipline, you can really make some serious bank off of it. That's it for this video guide. I hope this helped, and I hope this helps you in your future. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.